Hi crafters, Amy here with Amy's Wares, and today I'm going to use my new watercolor pencils with my stencils. So let's jump right in. This is the petal overlay from a Colorful Life Designs. It's an older one from the shop, and I did spray the back of it with pixie spray to hold it down onto this piece of inexpensive Canson watercolor paper. I do have my blending brushes here and my Distress ink in the color Hickory Smoke. And I recently obtained these new watercolor pencils from the Distress line. I do have the set 2. I was excited about this one because it had Seedless Preserve and Cracked Pistachio, which are two of my favorite colors. Plus I felt like it had the fixins for a proper rainbow. So here are a couple photos of the finished card. You can see I actually ended up using 2 stencils in addition to those pencils, and here's a close-up here. Now, it's not very often that an idea that I have in my head ends up turning out the way I pictured it, but in this case it actually did. So I got these Distress watercolor pencils after some deliberation. I wasn't sure. Obviously I didn't need them, and I don't use my colored pencils or my other watercolor pencils quite enough, so it probably wasn't really justified in this purchase. But once I did take the plunge, I came up with this idea of kind of like a no-line watercoloring idea, but not really. So basically I'm just doing some ink blending with this Distress ink. It doesn't show very much, but I assure you it will show in the finished design. But basically I wanted to lay down the foundation in a light gray and then kind of manually color in the design of the stencil in certain spots where I wanted it. So I'm just doing this initial ink blending, and then I decide to bring in this really cool interrupted line stencil, also from a Colorful Life Designs, just to add some unexpected interest. So I oftentimes will kind of mix and match my stencils, and you can really stretch your supplies and come up with just endless possibilities on your design by doing this. So after I'm done shifting this all around and making a mess, I do lay down a little bit more of the gray with that first petal overlay stencil still in place. So it's only going to put down the second stencil wherever the first stencil is not, because that first stencil is still kind of masking off the flower design. And look at how cool this is. I honestly could have stopped here, but obviously I want to play with my new goodies. So I have this watercolor brush water brush pen from Arteza, and I'm opening up these new Distress pencils to take them on their maiden voyage. And I do end up only using 2 of them for this card. I use Seedless Preserve and Kitsch Flamingo. So obviously I need to still swatch these and play with them more, but I just really wanted to jump in when I had this idea with the gray stenciling. So it has that nice thick plastic protective sheet to kind of keep the pencils protected. Now these are woodless. I don't know entirely what that means. I think it means that it's solid pigment. So it looks like wood on the outside, but it's really just kind of like a label or something. So I think it's actually solid pigment all the way through on these pencils. So they're a little bit different maybe than other ones that are, you know, wood and then with like a extrusion of the watercolor pencil on the inside. I'm not sure. Either way, they were fun to play with, and I'm just laying down some of the Seedless Preserves and then kind of heavier handed towards the center of the bloom and then going more light handed as I move out. And this is the Kitsch Flamingo. So I'm just starting off in real time here so you can see how long this actually took me, but I will speed up the later parts just because I don't want to keep you here all day. You have some crafting to do. So I'm just using this water brush pen. I have a piece of paper towel off to the side so I can kind of clean the brush off as I need to, and then I'm just kind of letting it fade into the gray. Now what's cool about this, and what I was hoping would happen, was that it was still going to be translucent enough to show the design through. So the spots where I use the interrupted lines, I wanted that to still be evident even on the areas where I laid down the pencil. So here I'm going to show you close up. It still has a little bit of a sketchy, pencil-y look to it, but it did definitely move around even on this watercolor paper. I would be curious to try these or this technique on Bristol smooth paper, which is often what I use for any of my water brush pens, like my Corine markers or my Arteza water brush pens. I really like the Bristol Smooth just because even though it's not an actual watercolor paper, it has like a coating and it really allows pigment to move around, and it can handle kind of a lot of water for it not being a proper, you know, watercolor cardstock or watercolor paper. So here I'm just kind of filling in the rest of the petals, and then I decide to come in with the water and then just move from petal to petal. And I am freehanding this, just following along the lines of the stencil. It wasn't hard to do. If I did come outside of the line, then I just made sure I cleaned all the pigment off the brush and laid a little bit of water down in the area, and I was able to sop up the mistake with the paper towel, just like you would be able to with any other sort of watercolor medium. But again, I wasn't worried about it being too perfect here because yeah, it's kind of a messy watercolor look to begin with, and even the stencil itself is a little bit whimsy. So you can see I'm just kind of really concentrating the color towards there. I fixed a mistake. I'm concentrating the color towards the center of the bloom and then just pulling it out a little bit into the Kitsch Flamingo, and then that's going to finish the coloring part. Now I'm just expediting this process here a little bit with my heat tool. I considered coming in and putting in some leaves with the cracked pistachio color, but I decided not to in this case. But that is another option to bring in even more color. And I was just adding a little bit of water into my little glitter watercolor palette. Those are from Yuli, the little 6-pack of the quarter pans of metallic watercolor came together, and then I also purchased that half pan of the charcoal black and added that into the tin, and the tin came with the order and everything. So that's what I've been using to lay really beautiful glitter splatter, and I have it on my desk at all times, and I just use my water brush to actually do it. So here I used a LDRS Creative frame die, and I centered it really well on the panel because I knew I wanted to use the frame as well. So here you can see I'm laying down the splatter. I had quite a bit of water, so that's why you got bigger blobs. It wasn't really what I intended. However, it ended up kind of looking like glittery sequins that I would have laid down anyway. So it wasn't a deal breaker in this case. If I would have gotten blobs of this black that were too big, then it may have been like an actual proper sequin moment or something like that where I may have covered it up. So if you don't want to risk big blobs, then obviously just have it a little bit of a thicker consistency and not too much water. Now here I'm using the frame of the watercolor panel, and that watercolor panel was cut down 4 1/4 to 5 1/2, so it was a full card front size. And I'm just going to liquid glue and lay this frame down directly on the card base. So I'm going to press that down, and then I'm actually going to end up popping up the center portion of the panel so that it lines up with the outline, but it's actually going to be more elevated because of the dimension. But you can see it just nestles right back in there. And now here I'm shopping my sentiment book. This is my storage solution for all my die cut sentiments, and I have little sentiment strips, which is ultimately what I'm going to end up using. These are also from LDRS Creative, so another small business in Michigan. You can get these sentiment stamps, which have, I don't know, maybe 10 or something, and it's all in one stamp, and then you use one die and it cuts them all out in one pass with those beautiful little fishtail edges. So I decided to choose this You're One of a Kind. And then another option in the shop that recently came out are these shadow layers. So again, this is one die, cuts out all these strips that coordinate with the other stackable sentiments, and then it creates the perfect little shadow background for your little label strips. So you can just really pop them up and add something to them. Now these I wanted to get rid of the fishtail, so you can obviously keep the fishtail, or in this case I just snipped it off and then snipped them off of the shadow layer as well, and I still have that nice gray border for my sentiment. I'm just going to pop it up with these little thin foam strips that I get from Amazon. I will link them in the video description box below with all of the other products that I used. But basically I'm just going to put that down right on the card front. But first I'm going to use this thick foam tape. This is from scrapbook.com. It's an inch thick and I love this stuff. I've kind of made the switch from the 3M 3/4 inch Big Mama roll to this stuff just because I think I prefer it. I like the thickness. I like that it doesn't really turn yellow, and I've gotten that 3M stuff off of Amazon, and I don't know if it was a knockoff, but it didn't quite seem like other rolls that I've gotten in the past. So I just started getting it from scrapbook.com, and that's been working out great for me. So just going to remove the backer on this little sentiment strip and lay that down onto the card where I want it in the composition. And that's going to finish the card. You can see this beautiful shimmer from that splatter. Like I said, it looks almost like sequins because some of the blobs are so big. So that was a happy little accident, but it's got this nice detailed border from the LDRS die. And this was such a fun way to use these new Distress watercolor pencils with my stencil. Now, thanks for sticking around. This is a bonus card. I wanted to show you of another way to use this stencil. I really loved how it looked with the gray, so I used some gray cardstock and actually the black soot Distress ink from the lineup, and actually did some very simple ink blending. And this stamp is from Simon Says Stamp, and now I have an easy sympathy card for my stash. So I hope you enjoyed these examples. If you did, please hit the thumbs up and consider subscribing. I really appreciate you and your comments and all you do to support my channel. It means a lot. So thanks so much and have a great day. Bye.